Chapter 1. The Tree. Wounded I hung on a wind-swept gallows for 9 long nights, pierced by a spear, pledged to Odin, offered myself to myself. The wisest know not from whence spring the roots of that ancient rood. Runatatr Othins, Odin's Song of Runes.
Do you know what hell is? Hell is 2 mist-shrouded peaks, nestled together like buttocks. It's still the same jagged lines of rocks shrouded in bluish mist. It's the 2 distant patches of forest visible in the distance, climbing the slopes, ablaze with royal autumn colors. It's 73 coniferous shrubs, twisted as if shaped by a bonsai master. It's the scattered white-gray boulders of limestone rocks, gray as rotten meat. It's the glittering spit of snow caps on the summits. It's a postcard-perfect mountain landscape that becomes everything. Unchanging, monotonous, and beautiful. A postcard suddenly elevated to the role of the universe. It's the eternal anger and fury trapped in the rings of wood. It's the dried, wooden throat that knows no scream. This is hell. Its roots writhing in the Rocky Mountains soil like worms, desperately searching for a bit of nourishing humus among the acidic, brittle slate tiles, fragile as dead fingernails. It's the sunlight smelling of sticky sweetness. It's the narrow, forged arrowhead lodged in the wooden guts. It's the foreign, dead branch piercing the trunk like a frozen lightning bolt. It's a prayer for a storm, for a sudden waterfall of electric liberation, for thunder, ash, and fire. This is hell. To be a tree, horror, horror, horror. It appears suddenly, straight from the autumn fog. It emerges abruptly from behind the ridge, a pale face cut by zigzagging tattoo marks, bulging black eyes flashing with narrow strips of whites. Dried blood spatters on the cheeks and forehead. He grabs a root and a piece of rock violently, tries to climb higher, but something pulls him back. He's young, 17 at most, and utterly, mortally terrified. He no longer cares that tears of fear stream down his face, that a wail escapes his lips. All that matters is the unknown force pulling him back, into the abyss. The cause is banal. A brown blanket, fastened at the shoulders with a silver clasp featuring dancing snakes, has snagged on a root. Yet the boy drowns in the depths of panic. He can only struggle helplessly, can only push forward like a draft horse. Seconds slip through his fingers, streams of blood from the wound on his forehead run down his cheeks. The boy. By local standards, he's been an adult for a long time now. He's a warrior, born with deadly iron in his hands, lulled to sleep with songs of heroes, hardened by visions of his own heroic death. And yet now he cries, struggles with the cloak caught on the roots, because up close, it's different than in the songs. His own death, seen up close, seems foul, commonplace, and painful. There will be no moving, beautiful death worthy of a song. Up close, it's only a cruel, terrifying death somewhere in the mountains. A lonely agony and a well of terror. And above all, the inability to reconcile with the fact that it's now. Immediately. Today. Forever. An arrow with a venomous hiss embeds itself in the slate soil right next to the boy's hand. A choked, brief cry is heard, and the young man finally finds the clasped silver snakes crushing his throat and pulls out the pin. The cloak falls from his shoulders. The clasp tumbles into the abyss, bouncing off the stones, and the teenage warrior crawls on all fours along the steep path, clutching at bushes and rocks. They are coming. You can hear guttural curses and rapid breathing. You can hear the creaking of thick leather and the clank of steel. Another arrow shoots up from the valley and whistles just above the escapee's head, buzzing like an angry hornet. They are coming. 3. They don't wear red-black tattoos on their hands and faces, nor slicked-back braids smeared with tar. Under the helmeted noses and angular cheek guards, you can see short-cropped beards. They call to him, triumphantly, hoarsely. Steam gushes from them, clouds condensed in the icy autumn air. One leans out from behind the ridge and shouts to someone below, the echo bouncing off the mountains. They laugh, watching him crawl forward on all fours, as he tries to get up and run but stumbles, falls, and crawls again. The first, massive as a mountain, takes off his helmet and carefully places it on the ground, then unfastens his cloak, releasing more steam from the laminated armor. He shouts again, mockingly, defiantly, and slowly draws his sword. The steel blade scrapes with a long, drawn-out screech. The giant straightens up and flexes his shoulders. Something cracks in his neck. The boy helplessly feels for the empty scabbard on his belt, a memory of the lost weapon. But he still crawls forward, blind and deaf with fear. For a moment, he raises his gaze and suddenly sees the trunk. His eyes and mouth widen even more, and disbelief and extreme astonishment spread across his face. It seems he has found something he's been searching for a long time. For a few moments, he forgets about the pursuers surrounding him and lifts his eyes along the stocky trunk, concealing a human silhouette with arms spread wide. Between the branches, there's a growth resembling a head with a face twisted in pain, and in the middle of the trunk, a silver shaft of an ash spear protrudes. It doesn't last long. A hoarse cry brings the escapee back to earth, to the last seconds of life, leaking like beer from a broken jug. They call to him again, relaxed, brimming with adrenaline. The finale of a tiresome chase. They've got him. Just a few more steps. The end. It's almost over. A slaughter at the foot of the tree. They'll finish him, and then they'll descend into their valleys, to their rivers and lakes. They'll light a fire and drink October beer, laughing and slapping each other on the back. The smell of roast meat, song, and the laughter of the living will rise to the rafters. They'll bring chains dipped in dragon oil and dance their dance of fire. Naked girls painted with wild patterns, their hair covered with scarves, will wrap themselves in flame, leap among the tamed embers, sweeping their slender bodies with braids of fire, and he will be gone, forever. He fears the tree, but not as much as he fears the eternal darkness locked in the steel of his pursuers. He leaps to his feet for those last few steps, reaches the trunk, and desperately pulls at the ash shaft. The spear embedded in the trunk remains motionless, like another branch. They surround the boy in a circle, laughing and calling to him. One sits down with a sigh on a rock and unbuckles a leather-covered flask from his belt. Another thrusts his sword into the ground and stretches, rubbing his sore back. The giant strides toward the boy with a dancing step, mocking advice thrown from behind him sparking bursts of laughter. The sword in the giant's fingers dances. The blade traces circles and eights. The hilt spins skillfully in his calm hand. Juggling, buffoonery. The warrior sways his hips, his legs perform a boxer's dance, his bent body sways along with the blade. It's hard to believe that such a massive man can move so lightly and nimbly. He's like a mountain gorilla, big, hairy, and brutal. A short lunge, feint, parry, a feigned strike to the head. The boy shields himself with his arm, falls back against the trunk, slides down it to the ground. A large, wet stain suddenly spreads across his pants. His opponent finishes his dance with the blade held horizontally, resting on the back of his other hand. He turns that hand over and beckons the boy forward encouragingly. Come on. The escapee coils around the trunk like a snake, crawling among moss and dried ferns, groping with his hands like a blind man. Anything. Even a stone. The huge warrior slowly straightens up, sighs, and shakes his head in disapproval. He spreads his arms helplessly for a moment, then throws his sword to those standing behind him, and claps twice, as if trying to wake his opponent, then invites him again with empty-handed gestures. Come on, there's no sword anymore. But there's no response. The skinny young man has no desire to throw himself bare-fisted at a 100-kilo mountain of sinewy muscle. Adrenaline has filled his legs with lead, and a terrible, mortal exhaustion is sinking into his lungs like concrete. The giant lowers his hands in resignation and strides forward with long steps to grab the boy by the scruff of the neck and drag him out from among the bushes like a kitten. This is getting distasteful. The large hand reaches and grabs the collar of the black coat just as the boy's desperately searching fingers find, among the moss, leaves, and dried mountain grass, an elongated shape. A flattened cylinder wrapped in a perfectly fitting woven tape. The hilt of a universal sword of a scout, shinobi kin by Nordland Aeronautics. The boy, yanked powerfully by his back, is lifted into the air, set on his faint legs with one movement. Then the hiss of the monomolecular blade rings out. And then a flash cuts the air, and in the cold autumn air, there's the crunch of cleaved flesh. The giant releases his opponent and slowly turns to his stunned, rock-sitting companions, showing a white, chalky, immobile face, then suddenly snorts powerfully, spraying a fountain of blood. His chest splits open along a thin diagonal line, revealing a gaping, black-red interior. The man takes a blind, clumsy step in an unknown direction and falls face first like a felled tree. Everyone is stunned. The hunchbacked boy, holding out the shining monomolecular blade from which streams of blood drip to the ground, revealing the gleaming clean surface of the sword. The warriors sitting on the rocks. One frozen with a tilted canteen in his hand, water pouring onto his boots, the other biting his fist in surprise. They jump to their feet simultaneously. A flash of steel, the clank of blades, and quick, blurred movement. A scream. A sharp, surprised cry of pain. One of the attackers suddenly doubles over, clutching his throat. A stream of bright arterial blood spurts between his fingers. The other jumps back, looking in horror and disbelief at the broken sword hilt in his hand. He can't believe that his opponent's panicked, clumsy parry sliced through his own forged blade like a dry twig. He throws the weapon away and quickly reaches for the bearded man's abandoned sword, thrust into the ground. The boy swings wildly, clumsily, struggling with the overly long weapon, the strange hilt, the different balance of the sword. The other man lets out a short, animalistic growl. His right hand falls onto the moss like a discarded glove. But there's no blood yet. He grabs the weapon with his left hand and lunges at the boy, knocking him to the ground. They both crash heavily onto the ground, the back of the attacker, covered in a half-coat adorned with a back embroidery of 3 dancing flames in a circle. Spasms, and in the middle of the back, just above the embroidered symbol, the blade sticks straight into the sky, with blood dripping down it, revealing its clean, gleaming surface. Silence. All that can be heard is the man dying in his own blood, scraping his boots on the rocky scree and tearing at the dry autumn turf. And then, complete silence falls. The boy struggles to roll the corpse off to the side, freeing himself from its grip, unwrapping the clenched hand from his own coat, finger by finger, then gets up, steps on the man's chest, and with a gasp, pulls out the blade. He looks at it in disbelief, and his legs give way beneath him, and he collapses heavily onto the moss. The sword trembles in his hand, his whole body shudders. The young man lowers his head and begins to cry. A strange, dry sob that shakes his small figure. A sob that gradually turns into hysterical laughter. He kneels there, with his head thrown back, raising the sword of the scout, Shinobi Ken by Nordland Aeronautics, in his bloodied hand. The giggle, born of tears, turns into a victorious roar, shrill and strange, ending with a thundering hiss, like that of an enormous enraged snake. The boy gets to his feet and looks at the blood-spattered rocks, the suddenly reddened circle of gray autumn grass, and the 3 twisted corpses around him. He carefully sets the sword down, wipes his hands on the grass, on the slick red stones lying around the dead giant, then touches his own face and approaches the trunk in a half-bow to leave the imprint of his stained hands on it. He kneels in the grass and gropes for a while until he finds the lone sheath. The sword snaps back home with a crack. The boy turns the weapon, but doesn't know how to attach it to his belt. Finally, he rests the sword on his shoulder like a shovel and walks away along the narrow path, in the exact opposite direction from where he came. Only the tree remains, the blood-spattered rocks around, and the 3 corpses of the fire people. 2 peaks nestled together like buttocks. The snowy spit on the summits. The cry of a raven in the cold autumn air. The wooden fury frozen in the rings and fibers of the wood. Night is coming, and at night, the wolves come. Sometimes, between the mountains, you can see smoke. Columns of black smoke drawing across the autumn sky. At night, the peaks are painted by the orange glow of fire. Sometimes the icy autumn air carries a distant scream, and sometimes only the cawing of ravens. One can see 2 patches of forest climbing the slopes, ablaze with the royal colors of autumn. 73 coniferous shrubs, twisted as if shaped by a bonsai master. Scattered white-gray boulders of limestone rocks, gray as rotten meat. The sparkling spit of snowcaps on the summits. One can see hell. The path descends. One can see hell. The path descends steeply, somewhere beyond the field of vision, beyond the boundaries of the universe. But it's not so steep that a determined person couldn't traverse it. Even a stocky dwarf can compel his crooked legs to effort, force them to conquer a mountain trail, pulling a cart with a donkey hitched to it, resembling a grotesque cross between an okapi and a miniature giraffe. He ties the reins to one of the 73 twisted coniferous trees. The ravens, picking at the remains of the fire people's corpses already scattered by wolves, rise in a flapping black cloud, cawing in indignation. The dwarf sits on a gray limestone rock and pulls out a cloth from his pocket, revealing a piece of smoked cheese and something that resembles a black tomato. He cuts off a piece of cheese and brings it to his mouth on the tip of his knife, then carefully bites into the black fruit. For a moment, he chews in silence.
So clever, sleeping in a tree while the world burns.
He cuts another piece of cheese. The stench of corpses or their presence doesn't seem to bother him.
I said it's clever. I gave you a good name, tree sleeper. You say you wander at night, and I say you prefer to have ravens shit on you. You'd rather search for water between stones and wait for the sun to shine on you. You know how to recognize a fool? By how he ends, tree sleeper.
He takes another bite of the black fruit, then, groaning, rummages through his pockets until he finds a small lump of salt, which he crushes on the rock with the pommel of his knife. Now the fruit, sprinkled with dirty salt and probably adorned with an ant, is much better.
You saw what the doer is. You saw the living thorns of iron. You saw the moving cord of 1,000,000 blades and wheels. You saw people turned into trees and stones. You saw the monsters of the cold mist. And what? Perhaps you went to talk to him? Did you say you'd take him across the seas back home? Maybe you reminded him of matters he had left behind in distant lands. Or maybe you decided to grab him by the scruff and carry him back like a puppy that wandered out of the kennel.
He finishes the fruit, carefully wraps the cheese in the cloth, and puts the knife away. He stands up with a groan, wiping his hands on his pants.
And now the world is burning, or soon will be. You sit in the trunk and think about how to produce acorns, while the doer does whatever he wants, and soon he'll think it's time to find your tree. It's close. Nothing's improved, but things have started to get even worse.
He raises his hand and points between the peaks, nestled together like buttocks, where the long shadow of a tree points. A shadow that looks like a knife.
Look to the east, tree sleeper. Look at the smoke from the burning settlements. Listen to the rat minstrel who calls the children from their homes at night. Watch as the wild animals follow the sound of his flute, straight into the snake's knives. The price of salt is already higher than gold. The snakes need a lot of meat, which means that when winter passes, they'll head to the coast. Watch and sit in the tree. Watch as the war of the gods rises, after which a different world will dawn. The time of slavery is coming, the time of corpses, snakes, and the howling of wolves. A dawn will rise that even the trees will not want to see.
He walks over to his one-wheeled cart, lifts the dirty tarp, and rummages among the bundles, barrels, and odds and ends. Finally, he turns around and shows a short, heavy axe with a broad blade and a massive head.
Kill me.
The tree doesn't move a single branch. Trees can't move unless the wind blows. The tree is motionless, immersed in the deadness of wood. It is wooden fury. It is rotting despair. A tree is a tree. The dwarf wipes his hands on his pants once more, and with effort, raises the axe. Then he turns it around and strikes the butt against the end of the silver ash spear sticking out of the trunk, as if driving a nail. A dull, wooden thud pierces the silence of the icy autumn air. And then another, and another. Somewhere high above, a raven caws. After a while, there's a creaking sound, like a desperate, drawn-out moan. The fibers of the bast wrapped around the spear shaft begin to break, along with the white layers of the cambium. A stream of sap flows down the smooth trunk, marked with bloody handprints. The spear starts to move, driving deeper into the trunk. There is no terrifying wild scream, no echo reverberating through the mountains. The tree is silent. A tree is a tree. The spear sinks deeper into the trunk until it reaches the crushed end of the shaft. The crow's shadow sets the axe down and circles around the trunk. He braces himself with his foot, groaning with effort, but the wooden rod holds firm. The entire diameter of the trunk grips it. The dwarf tugs the shaft up and down, carefully but forcefully. He tries to loosen the hard ashwood rod in the tree's wound, like a sick tooth, but he doesn't want to break it. There's no rattling, no screaming, no weeping or pleas for mercy. A tree is a tree. Trees don't scream. All that can be heard is the crack of breaking fibers. The dwarf falls onto his back, and the spear rolls across the ground.
I sell things that do,
He explains, scrambling to his feet.
I don't know what this does, but one can feel that it's powerful. Maybe it will bring misfortune to its owner, or maybe it will never miss its mark if thrown at a moron. Or maybe it'll turn him into a tree. I'll call it the Spear of Fools.
He turns the spear in his hand, tucks the end under his arm, and then looks along the shaft. Finally, he props it on the ground and critically examines the tip with his thumb.
You once asked me for advice, Tree Sleeper, and now I'll give you some advice. You'll no longer play king with me for it. You've lost your game. But do you know how to win after you've already lost?
He throws the spear onto the cart and shoves it among the bundles, but the shaft still sticks out to the back from the short crate. Now it only misses a red cloth tied to it.
When you've lost, you have to knock down the pieces and set them up again. When you've lost, the only way to win is to start over.
He sits under his cart, leaning against the wheel, and fiddles with the axe, tossing it between his knees.
I'll give you advice. Listen, it might be of some use, though I doubt it. No one can pull you out of the tree, just as no one could show the fish-eyed doer how to make the iron thorns alive. He traveled through the land in a single coat without even a sword. He goes where he wants, and now hundreds of snake people bow to him. He sits in his iron court of scythes and axes, while you sleep in the tree and the wolves piss on you. Why did this happen? How is he different from you? Are you so different from where you come from? He commands the mist, conjures monsters from it, and drives the snakes to madness. And you think you can deal with him by drawing your sword fast. You're both outsiders, both you and him. He upset the balance of the world. He's like a knife driven into a king's board. When people play for high stakes, sometimes someone reaches for iron. Blood is spilled and someone takes the money. But did he win the game? There's a war of gods. Some find it convenient. And there are those who want the world to be a king's board again, not a knife brawl. They'll advise you, but their advice will be useless as long as you sleep in the tree. You must wake up, or stay here and wait until the fish-eyed doer douses your trunk with dragon oil. Wake up, tree sleeper. That's my advice.
He unties his giraffe-like okapi and untangles the reins. The cart's wheels begin to creak as it carefully rolls down the sloping path. The crow's shadow walks beside it, suddenly pulling the reins and stopping. He searches for something on the cart for a long time, overturning bundles.
You gave me the Spear of Fools, Tree Sleeper. You deserve something in return.
He unties a leather bag and carefully pulls out something that looks like a shapeless purple puffball covered in yellow spikes. The dwarf tosses it in his hand, and suddenly, with one swift motion, hurls it directly at the wooden face crowning the trunk, between two branches, grasping at the gray autumn clouds. The fruit splatters against the bark, leaving a stain of bright juice and scattering a cloud of yellow spores. The crow's shadow chuckles, flicks the reins, and continues down the path, beyond the boundary of the world, trying to slow his cart.
Wake up, Tree Sleeper,
he shouts once more over his shoulder. And then the cold, misty silence of the mountain autumn settles. The sunset paints the snowy spittle blood red. Wake up. Easier said than done. A tree cannot move, cannot crack or turn inside out. A tree can grow, turn its leaves to the sun, and shed them when the autumn chill comes. It can absorb carbon dioxide from the air, sip water and minerals from the soil, and bask in the sweet sunlight. It can also remain silent, endure, and desire. The tree stands motionless. It is still a tree, but something has changed. The spear that pierced it through is gone. A round wound with ragged edges has appeared, along with 2 bloody handprints and a stain where the strange fungus hit the trunk. If one waits patiently, perhaps someone will carve a heart with a penknife at the tip. But something else has changed. Something of the realm of things that cannot be seen. There's something ominous in the atmosphere of the clearing. Something that wasn't there before. The ravens take flight, circling over the slope, screeching as if someone were tearing black rags into strips. Despite the cold, the air quivers and ripples like it does during intense heat. The wolves, returning with the onset of night, freeze in place. They're enormous, about 3 meters long with powerful fangs, but even they are afraid. They tuck their ears, bristle their lion-like manes of fur. The pack leader sniffs cautiously, growling and baring his teeth, glancing sideways at the tree, at the frost accumulating around the trunk, as if the tree had released liquid nitrogen into the ground. Finally, he takes a few cautious steps, sniffing on stiff legs as he approaches the spot where the half-eaten corpses of the fire people still lie. The tree remains silent. But the tree's desire to release the fury trapped in its rings and fibers, to expel the man embedded within the wood, seems almost palpable. It chills the night air with a blast of cold, and suddenly, fog seeps onto the clearing in thick bands. It winds through the branches, evaporates from the trunk, and oozes from the ground. Cold fog. Very cold. At the terrifying howl and screech of the pack leader, the cautious pack bolts in panic. The wolf, as large as a calf, coils and thrashes around the clearing, squealing in terror as if it had swallowed a burning coal. Convulsions slam it into the ground, twisting it into impossible positions for a quadruped, hurling its body into the air. It resembles a crazed dance that might seem comical, if not for the horrifying screech of the dying animal. It looks as though an invisible giant were playing with the wolf, forcing it to walk on 2 legs and dance. One eye bursts from the pressure inside its skull. Its tongue hangs in shreds from its mouth, and beneath the wolf's skin, muscles writhe like panicked snakes. The invisible giant tries to mold the poor creature like clay, shaping it into a grotesque human-like figure. You can hear ribs cracking with dull thuds, joints snapping. And above all, there's the terrifying howling and gurgling. For a moment, it seems as though the invisible titan might succeed. The wolf, positioned upright as if nailed to an invisible cross, with outstretched and broken limbs, briefly resembles a grotesque werewolf. Its muzzle pulses, as if something inside is trying to reshape it. Fog swirls around. Tiny electrical discharges snap, and it seems like the earth trembles and vibrates. The clearing is suddenly coated with a premature frost. The werewolf, standing in the middle of the clearing, still writhes in invisible, powerful hands shaping it like clay. For a fraction of a second, amid the crunch of bones and sprays of blood, its muzzle morphs into a ghastly caricature of a man's face contorted in agony. It lasts for a split second. Then the unfortunate, mutilated creature collapses to the ground like a rag, reverting back into a wolf. It is mangled, torn to shreds, without a single whole bone, looking as if it had been run over by a mining machine. The tree remains silent. The tree cannot rise, cannot move a single branch, cannot expel the man fused into its wood and bark. But the tree does not tire, and it never yields. A layer of fog swirls over the clearing, rippling like murky white water. The earth trembles. Small stones break off from the slope and tumble into the abyss below in a shower of gravel. Rise and go. Wake up! There's a rustling sound, and the fire people, pecked apart by ravens and torn by wolf fangs, begin to move. Their shattered, skinless skulls lift, staring with bloody eye sockets. They move blindly, worm-like, attempting to crawl, dragging tattered limbs and scattering worms and beetles that have already made their home in their guts. One of the corpses stiffly rises from the ground, trying to stand shakily on its feet. Another tries to limp forward, but it's missing its right leg, which the wolves had torn off. It topples straight into the abyss, disappearing into the darkness below, where the sound of tumbling rocks and clattering stones can be heard. But the rest move on. They march with a dead, mechanical gait into the night, into the darkness and the fog. Above, the ravens caw eerily, their voices filled with terror. The tree does not tire. It does not give up. The trunk is coated with a shaggy layer of frost. The branch is wrapped in a fluffy white rime. One of the rocks suddenly explodes, scattering a cloud of dust and whistling fragments, leaving behind an unfinished sculpture of a kneeling man, with a long face contorted in pain. The sculpture is like a scream, like an allegory of birth. The slope trembles. You can hear stones tumbling down, rock slabs cracking, and a stone avalanche rumbling down into the valley. Rise! Go! Wake up! The surface of the nearby stream suddenly sparkles with silver flashes, tiny fish flickering like coins, leaping desperately onto the shore and jumping into the air. A moment later, the water begins to boil. A frigid, dense mist seeps from the forest, winding down the slope like a giant serpent, creeping straight toward the clearing to engulf it along with the tree, the path, and the 73 arthritically twisted shrubs. It lasts for a long time. A very long time. But the tree does not tire. It does not give up. A tree is a tree. By morning the fog disappears. It dissolves, seeping into the rocks and the trunk. Even the frost melts. All that remains is the sculpture of the kneeling man, the cracked earth, and the shattered trunks of the nearby trees, as if something had exploded them from within. And 6 ash trees growing in different places around the clearing. Ash trees that weren't there yesterday. They all look as if they had swallowed a man with a face twisted in pain. The branches resemble arms reaching toward the sky. The individual statues are frozen in various poses, like a wooden dancing procession, like the paused phases of a convulsing figure. Some trunks are pierced by a branch resembling a spear, while others have a hollow in the middle shaped like a torn round wound. The ground around is cracked, mixed with shattered stones, as if the trees had erupted in one explosion, in a fraction of a second, shredding everything in their path. Apart from that, the clearing is calm. Only the ravens caw terribly, afraid to land. The sharp morning light is cut into strips by the slats of the blinds, smooth sheets. An old air conditioner hisses by the window, and somewhere a persistent scent of lavender wafts. Where am I? Lavender. A highland covered in lilac bushes, dotted with white rocks. Pines and lavender. Laid in bundles, carried to a stone press, from which heavy lavender smoke seeps. Lavender smoke, lavender fields, var, home. I stand up, naked, gleaming with sweat despite the asthmatic huffing of the air conditioner by the window. My head pounds. I think I'm sweating rakija. Not good. I don't remember anything, but somehow it doesn't worry me. I don't have the strength to worry. I slide open the door and step onto the terrace. Below me, the street is bathed in the morning heat, full of people strolling leisurely, while just ahead, in the narrow passage, traffic is moving like on a highway. Yachts pass each other, cutting through the emerald waves with flapping sails. And on the horizon, a giant Jadralinia hovercraft glides by. The palm tree crowns sway in the wind. The terrace tiles are burning my feet like a stovetop. A slender, graceful, black-eyed waitress setting up chairs in the cafe below looks up at me and giggles.
Dobar dan, Vučko.
Dobar dan, Milenko. Może espresso?
Może. Zašto nemaš hlači?
Dear God, I realize I'm still naked. I retreat, and Milena bursts into a mischievous laugh. Oprosti, Milena.
Polako, Polako, kuham kavu.
I get into the shower and stand there endlessly. It feels like I haven't washed in months. I brush my teeth without stepping out of the streams of water spraying from 8 nozzles, rubbing myself with cedar-scented body wash. I ignore the godless prices of water on Hvar, the bathroom meter greedily tallying kuna after kuna. I feel a nagging, crushing pain somewhere in my chest. My leg aches too. Did I sprain it? When? I massage my sternum, convincing myself it's just neuralgia. I'm not having a heart attack, surely. I've just had sclerotherapy. My heart's as strong as a 20-year-old's. I dress quickly, feeling life return to me. But the blazing, bright street is unbearable without dark sunglasses. I sit under the awning in the shade, gazing affectionately at the round, clean table. I feel like I've woken up from a nightmare. Everything delights me. The endless procession of tourists flowing into the square around the marina, the wind in the palm crowns, the red and white parasols of Karlovačko beer. The end of prohibition. Beer ads are back, the pubs have reopened, and the steel, smoke-sucking branded ashtrays have returned. Freedom. We are adults again. I'm even happy that the tiny cup of once again legal coffee from the Italian Alfredo espresso machine is immaculately clean, and that I can toss 2 cubes of real sugar into it. Milenko, może orangina, kruh I salata od chobotnice?
Może, Vučko. Sigurno.
Chwala. The pitch-black coffee is topped with a layer of thick beige foam, the smell of rich, strong Arabica. And yet, deep in my soul, there's a shadow of unease, an undefined darkness, the sense that something is not right, something with my head. Everything is as it should be, and yet my brain feels like it's been shattered, pieces separated by a dark void. Where was I yesterday? Who am I? When did things go back to normal? I'm sitting in a konoba, which means the velvet protective totalitarianism is gone. I don't remember when. After the fuel war? What was I doing then? What did I do yesterday? How did I get here? Milena, imaš cigareti?
Imam. Larsi hoćeš?
Wait, are they legal again? I lift the cup to my lips, but before I can take a sip, the white china cracks in my hand. Coffee splashes onto the sidewalk, and I pull my legs back quickly to save my light-colored pants. He sits down unceremoniously at the table, sliding a chair over for himself. A large graying man in a hat and a bright red silk shirt. The unbuttoned front reveals a swarthy, hairy chest draped with countless gold chains and pendants. He doesn't look Croatian. Serb? Gypsy? Turk? I glance at him with irritation, and suddenly I freeze. He has only one eye, completely black, without a trace of white, like a drop of oil. The other is hidden behind a round bone plate fastened with leather straps. On his knuckles, resting on a shiny ebony cane topped with a silver raven's head, glinting signet rings. On his head, a genuine white Stetson woven from Panama raffia. There are plenty of free tables here, my friend, I mutter. He spilled my coffee. Do I look like an oculist? Why is he scaring people with that bloody eye?
Wake up, in-tree sleeper.
He growls angrily.
They're waiting for you.
Good morning. Dobrodošli. A madman. Excuse me, I'm having breakfast. Perhaps you could find someone else? The clinic is that way, just behind the Fabryka. He straightens up in his chair, then puts 2 fingers in his mouth and whistles shrilly. In an instant, with the flapping of thousands of wings and deafening cawing, the sky turns black. I look up and see birds, a giant flock of huge, jet-black ravens covering the entire sky. They perch on rooftops, on yacht masts, on palm crowns, on the heads and shoulders of passers-by, frozen suddenly like mannequins. They even block out the bright light of the Balkan sun. I can't utter a word. I hear the constant cawing, like someone tearing black rags into strips. Everything is frozen as if submerged in amber. Only the ravens move. They perch on the shoulders and head of Milena, who is standing in the doorway of the tavern with a tray in her hands. A large raven flaps its wings, tousling her hair, and greedily gobbles up my octopus salad, while another lands on her shoulder and, with a single motion of its gray beak, sharp like an ice axe, gouges out her beautiful eye. Milena stands motionless, mid-step, as a stream of blood trickles down her dusky cheek, all the way to her white, frozen smile. My mouth is open, and my throat has suddenly turned into old wood.
What does it feel like when someone comes and sets your world on fire, in-tree sleeper?
The man asks. I sit in stunned silence. I don't know where I am. I don't know who I am. The man stands up and enters the tavern, brushing past the frozen, mutilated, bleeding Milena. Then takes down a Guinness advertisement from the wall, a mirror framed with frosty Art Nouveau patterns.
Look at yourself, in-tree sleeper,
He says.
Look into your own eyes.
I glance mechanically, and behind the silver hologram with the word Guinness, I see a strange, unfamiliar face. It looks like mine, yet it's foreign. Long, almost horse-like, with a nose narrow as a fin, ears narrow but long and close to the head, and eyes, like his, filled with dark hazelnut brown, reminiscent of roasted almonds. Is that me? Who am I? I sit like a wooden statue. I am Vuko Drakkainen, son of Aki Drakkainen and Anita Ostrowska. No. I am Ulf Nichesefni, the night wanderer, Midgard, the tree. I start to scream. I don't want to wake up. I don't want to. The whole world is enveloped in the black shadow of thousands of ravens. The raven shadow. They caw. I follow him mindlessly as we push our way through the crowd of tourists frozen in a snapshot among the flapping ravens. He lifts his ridiculous cane and unceremoniously parts a group of frozen Japanese tourists. We walk. He leads me to the hotel, the glass panels sliding apart with a swish. I feel a blast of cool, air-conditioned air on my face. The gypsy Turk of the Raven Shadow walks authoritatively through the vestibule, then through the restaurant. More doors slide open before us, revealing a terrace. I follow him, and suddenly I'm standing in a large workshop. There's no terrace, no view of the bay, only a room lined with tiles smeared with grease, a roaring forge, a crane rattling chains from the ceiling. A computer-controlled pneumatic hammer pounds away, and some large bearded fellow with his face shielded by a mirrored visor bends over a complex steel structure, a control glove on his hand, while a mechanical arm ending in a welding nozzle hangs from the ceiling, shooting bursts of sparks among the steel guts every few moments.
Turn it off, Uko!
My guide shouts.
You'll drive us crazy. We're here to talk.
The bearded man lifts the mirrored mask and seems to stare at us silently. He spreads his fingers. The hammer stops. The lathe sputters to a halt with a dying whistle. The welding arm retracts its limbs and extinguishes the acetylene-spitting nozzle, then rolls back up to the ceiling, resembling a steel praying mantis. Silence falls. Only the ringing in my ears remains. I know this place. It's Uncle Atalainen's workshop. Even the cars standing around, American road cruisers, looking like chromed fortepianos, are the same as in my childhood. The man called Uko raises the mirrored mask from his face and pushes it to the back of his head, then nods toward a small office. A tiny room with a desk and computer, the walls plastered with advertisements for spare parts, and a calendar that insults women by depicting them as sexual objects. There's nowhere to sit.
I'm not here for an axe or horseshoes, blacksmith,
Growls the Raven Shadow.
We need to confer.
The blacksmith opens a small Czech fridge and pulls out 2 cans of beer. One for himself, one for the Raven Shadow. I feel offended.
Is this the guy?
Asks the blacksmith rather rhetorically.
You insult me, Raven. This is supposed to be our hope? A stray enchanted in a tree? Another stray?
He cracks the can open, foam invading his bushy beard. The blacksmith drinks. My guide sits on a plastic chair for customers and also opens his beer. His eyes are filled with a deep underwater purple.
And how are your fire people doing, blacksmith? Will we still see girls dancing with flames to celebrate the return of the light this spring? Or will it be eternal darkness, ashes, and the snakes?
Yes. You're gonna soon tell me that the world is changing. As if you didn't know where it's heading. We've got a problem, Raven.
The blacksmith says irritably, snapping his fingers. A small flame appears on his hand, a tiny dancing flame like from a cube of dry fuel. The man plays with it, molding it absently into the figure of a dancing girl, then watches it for a moment. The fiery figure writhes between his fingers as if practicing pole dancing. The blacksmith blows, and the flame disappears.
Our problem is the outsiders who steal the songs, break the rules, and upset the balance. Those who came with power they don't even understand, doing whatever comes into their heads and tearing the world apart. Luckily, we still have the traitor, the wanderer, the friend of the men, who has a plan. That plan is, let's add another lunatic with a torch. You have foxes in your coop choking the chickens, so you decide to let in a wolf. The wolf will kill the foxes, and then the geese will peck the wolf to death. Unless the wolf bows to the birds and leaves. Did I miss something? I've got a lot of work, Raven. My answer is no. The outsider in the tree is a harmless outsider. Pacified. A problem solved.
They're not alone.
The gypsy raises his voice.
They've got allies on our side. These outsiders are now part of the world, and someone's using them. Against us. Maybe you should talk to the snake.
So we're supposed to be like them? Admit that without swindling we can't beat them?
Because we can't. What will you use against the songs being used around left and right? I'll tell you what you'll do. You'll go down and start singing yourself. And is that supposed to be according to the rules? And you know what will happen next? They'll do the same. The snake, the whore, the move, the frost, and the others. You think they won't dare? One by one. The key rules haven't been broken yet. We have our doers, but so far none of us have started. It's them, the outsiders. They're the ones breaking the rules. We have a crisis, but not yet a war. You'll give them an excuse for war. They dream of it. I propose something else.
Yes, he's another outsider, agreed. But he came here to restore balance. So let's let him do that. My legs hurt, and I'm starting to get angry. I clench my jaw. I rummage through my pockets and finally find a pack of Lars cigarettes. Go ahead, old man. Tell me I can't smoke here. Come on, make my day, punk. Just try and see what happens. He ignores me. Raven Shadow ignores me too. The blacksmith reaches for a large screwdriver and, lost in thought, wraps it around his finger like a piece of rubber.
Who else have you spoken to?
You're the first. Let's go to them together.
The screwdriver turns into a very thick spring.
Who else wants to talk?
Vuko finally asks.
Wild and Salmon.
He's still alive. He's lost everything.
I've heard he's terrified of what's happening and wants to return.
From where he's gone to, there's no coming back.
And yet...
I clear my throat, flick away a small ash roll, and squat by the wall. It's all for nothing. I don't exist. I'm invisible. The blacksmith drives the pretzel-shaped screwdriver into the table and stands up. We exit through sliding doors, beyond which there should be a parking lot, and then the road to Rovaniemi winding above the fjord among pines and birch trees. Both big shots go ahead, and I humbly follow behind. Invisible. Insignificant. Everything inside me is boiling. I don't like their rules, and the vague conversation about things I have no understanding of annoys me. If I were to open my mouth, they would ignore me, just like a 10-year-old interrupting an adult conversation they don't understand. And rightfully so, I don't understand. Behind the hangar doors, there is no parking lot with the tip-topped, century-old Cadillacs, Chevrolets, and Buicks, into which Uncle Atalainen used to fit Vankla hydrogen turbine engines and electronics. For generations, most of Detroit's historical automotive production either lay in the wild graveyard of Cuba or ended up in paradise in Finland. There's no Karelia at all. Instead, there's the Senegalese base of the Légion Étrangère in Alhama, the 3rd Airborne Cavalry Regiment. A sea of sand, an old kasbah crumbling like a sandcastle. Rows of barracks, scraggly palms, and concrete foam barricades bristling with automated turrets, their barrels constantly shifting, the blind eyes of sensors scanning the horizon. Behind the row of prefabricated barracks, a medevac is landing. Blurred patterns of dull, yellow, and sickly green pixels ripple across its fuselage. The converging rotor blades kick up a cloud of desert dust. The pulsing thrum of the engines fills the air. A group of legionnaires in cooling suits jogs toward the canteen, singing Alouette in chorus. We walk hunched over, sand stinging our eyes, crushed by the hellish heat. We sink into the sand up to our ankles. We bypass the fort and shuffle to a large, dull tent set up just outside the perimeter of the base. A brothel, if I recall correctly. Illegal, needless to say. Wizmir Bardak, Wuzje Liudi, Bliadzi, as Sergeant Chevelu used to say. Inside, there are field tables set up on sawhorses forming a long banquet, folding chairs and self-cooling bottles. In the corner, a small air conditioner wheezes and dribbles water. The party is just around the corner. Only one man is sitting at the table, dressed in a striped burnous, his dark hands sticking out from the cloth, playing with a curved Tuareg knife. His head, covered by a worn white kepi, is hidden in the shadow.
We haven't seen each other in a long time, Samum,
says the blacksmith, panting and seemingly having lost his patience.
Couldn't we have met normally? Why this comedy?
I take what's on the table,
grumbles the Bedouin in the kepi, then removes his headgear and throws it onto the table, revealing a striped head that looks part jackal, part panther.
I don't have the strength or time to sift through dreams. This is closest for me. Is this him?
He's talking about me. I'm him. Am I supposed to introduce myself? As who? Caporal Ostrovsky?
How do you like it?
Asks a girl, pulling back the tent flap. She's dressed strangely, like something out of a 20th century poster, the kind my father used to collect. She's wearing paratrooper boots, torn fishnet stockings held up by a garter, an unbuttoned tactical vest loaded with gear. There's a canteen, 6 magazines, grenades, a combat knife, a holster. But aside from that, she's naked. She has short hair. Her face is crisscrossed with camouflage polygons. A skull is tattooed on her shoulder. A bitch commando.
Suits you perfectly.
Raven Shadow mutters, fanning himself with his hand.
Lust and war.
The girl giggles.
My elements. Nice shirt, Raven.
Raven Shadow spits through his teeth and pulls a packet of Danish seaweed crackers toward himself. I grab a folding camping chair, a bottle of mineral water, and sit far from the table. I don't care about any of this. I am a tree. What more can they do to me? Chop me down, cut me into planks, and turn me into an outhouse. At least something is happening. I don't have to stare at the mountain peaks huddled together like buttocks, capped with icy spittle. Anything is better than that.
Look at him.
Raven Shadow says.
Feel his anger. Taste his defiance. Think about it. I say let's free him and let him clean up after his own kind. That's all he wants.
He's too weak,
says the jackal-headed Tuareg.
And he's just one. They came to learn, but they stayed to mold the world to their liking. To do. He could end the same. They all have that in them. The songs are attracted to them.
We don't know that.
The blacksmith interjects.
We don't know why what happened. Maybe he's different.
Why what happened. Beautiful expression. A master of tautology.
If he learns to do, the same thing could happen to him. If he doesn't, he'll die. Either way, it's bad. That's what I say.
Let's leave it to fate, to the fortune of war.
The girl giggles.
At least something will shake up this swamp. If we do nothing, they'll do it for us. Either way, it'll end the same. And I like him. He knows how to fight and how to fuck. I sense he hasn't had a woman in a long time.
I still think we should act fair.
The blacksmith shakes his head.
We won't improve the situation by breaking another rule. Let's kill him, quickly and painlessly. Then we can do as we should.
I repeat, we're not the ones breaking the rules.
Raven Shadow snaps angrily.
They're the ones breaking them. This outsider
He points to me with a cracker.
is the only piece that fits here. He's not one of us, and he's got a chance. A last one for us, too, I remind you.
I stand up. Every fun must end eventually. If I understand correctly, your problem is my compatriots. They look at me with astonishment and embarrassment, as if the air conditioner had just started talking. And also that they've mastered these so-called songs. Am I right in thinking they've gained too much power, control, whatever you want to call it? Is this how you run your world? These damn songs are lying around like garbage on the street, and when someone picks one up, you panic and cry about rules. Maybe someone should tell you that there aren't many unbreakable rules in life. What's the problem? That I'll become a magician too and start turning people into rabbits or flying on a shovel. If that's the case, at least you'll have only one mage to deal with and not several. If you want me to help you, give me the relevant information. Location, surroundings, capabilities of the object. Explain to me where my people are and what's happened to them. I need instructions on the songs of the gods and the phenomenon of the cold mist. If not, then screw you. I'll leave this tree and take them out of here. And if that's not possible, I'll kill them, or I'll stay in bloom. The priority of my mission is to restore balance to your world. As for the mists, talking buckets, dwarves, elves, and self-swinging sticks, I don't give a damn. If you think you can help me only if I tie an egg into a knot, make a whip out of ice and some other bullshit, I don't give a damn about that either. As simple as that. You can take it all and shove it up your assess deep enough so some place is left for you as well. I've never met a more pathetic group of gods. Goodbye. Vala. My regards to Mr. Delusion, kisses to Mr. Delirium. Goodbye, Ms. Nightmare. Shadow, please thank them for their time. We're leaving. Please switch Var back on for me. Put Milena's eye back and clean up the ravens. You spilled my coffee, Yebemti Maiku. Silence falls. They're still looking at me as if I had just performed a striptease in front of the Pope.
Well,
says the blacksmith.
I actually like that. I like people like him. He talks sense and keeps it short. Let's think this over.
I'm leaving, I announce. If you need me, you know where I grow. I'm busy. I have to shed my leaves. It's autumn, you understand. My branches are full of work.
Very well,
says the jackal in the kepi.
Leave now. We'll deliberate and decide. If we decide to kill you, you'll find out easily enough.
I step out of the tent. I also like when someone talks sense and keeps it short. I can see 2 patches of forest climbing the slopes, ablaze with the royal colors of autumn. 73 twisted coniferous shrubs, as if shaped by a bonsai master. Scattered white-gray boulders of limestone rocks, gray like rotting flesh, the sparkling spittle of snowcaps on the peaks huddled together like buttocks. 6 twisted ash trees, scattered here and there across the clearing. Each one looks as if its trunk had swallowed a person frozen in a convulsive movement. The tree vibrates with concentrated power. It is surrounded by a halo of shimmering air and a patch of shaggy frost, crusting the rocks, dry grass, and bushes. High above, a heavy, anvil-shaped cloud slowly begins to form. Spiraling air, full of vapor, drills a tunnel up to the stratosphere, where it's rapidly cooled. The small ice pellets ejected to the cloud's edges fall back toward the hot base. They turn into steam, which is sucked back into the tunnel and sent upward again, transforming into heavy chunks of ice in the cold layers of the atmosphere, over and over again. Inside, up, outside, down. The air tunnel inside the cloud becomes a giant capacitor, stuffed with free electrons, heavy with positive charges. The potential difference between the cloud and the surface of the Earth grows by the second. Everything moves towards balance, towards equilibrium, which is now disrupted. The potential difference reaches millions of farads and becomes unbearable. Everything vibrates with energy, a trembling, electric rage. At the top of the tree, a small snake-like pilot discharge flickers for a few nanoseconds. It leaps upward and closes the circuit. A gigantic waterfall of energy shoots down, flowing through the tree, its roots deep into the earth. For a second, between the cloud and the tree's peak, a blinding, gigantic plasma snake writhes with a terrifying crackle. The roar of thunder rolls through the mountains, mighty, as if the sky itself were splitting. All that remains is the torn, charred stump of the tree, roaring with orange flames. And then, a wall of water crashes down on everything,